kick off then. Don't worry if you can't see me. If you can see the screen, that's what we want. So hopefully you've spent a couple of minutes just to think about just what you want to get out of today's session. Preparation for this, all you need is just yourself, your focus, a bit of paper to make some notes, and a smile. Think about on your bit of paper, what is it that you want to get out of a session on sales, making sales simple? What is it you want to improve your conversion rate? Do you want to get more of the right type of customers? Do you want to uncover more needs so that you can upsell? What is it that you want to achieve? And just make a note on your bit of paper and put a circle around that, or type it in if you're using it electronically. And then let's get going. So some of you may not know me, but I'm Nick Gray, been with Action Coach for 9 years and with Essex Central for 18 months now. So been with Action Coach 9 years. Prior to that, I was 20 years in consumer finance. So amongst other things, it was a heavily sales-driven industry. And I learned a lot about sales there through courses, training, and doing the job. But it wasn't until I really joined Action Coach that I really understood sales at a deeper level. And with anything like this, it's about continual learning. So there's always ways to learn. But just by being here today and listening to this on recording, or being here live, you're in the top 5% of business people who invest time in improving themselves. But that's just part of it. And you can improve your ability by learning, but unless you take action, and that's why we're called Action Coach, unless you take action, you'll get nothing from this, or very little from this. So make notes, feel free to add to in the chat box, take part, ask some questions. That'll improve your ability to take in the knowledge. Make sure you take an action from today. You can take just one thing that you put into your business to make a change, then my job here is done. If you don't take an action, then it's questionable about how productive this hour's been. And if you haven't, by the way, then let me know, because I want to know if I haven't delivered for you to be able to take a good enough action from this. And that'll be good feedback for me. Okay, so your mission today is to take one thing at least that you can put into your business. So here's some of the things that we're going to cover today. Why people buy, the formula for change. People currently are not buying from you and you want them to buy from you. There's a change there. So we've got to understand the concepts of that to understand sales. Questions, one of the most powerful tools that you have in your arsenal. Listening, arguably just as important as questions. Building rapport, and then your sales process. So that's some of the things that we're gonna cover today. So who's in sales? The answer is that everybody's in sales, right? No matter what position you are in the company, then we're in sales. We might not like the idea of being labeled a salesperson, and that's more to do with our society and our view of salespeople as we've sort of grown up, because a lot of people have a lot of negative views on salespeople. But we're all salespeople. But it's not always easy, and even professionals find making sales a challenge. So how do they get good at it? You might have heard the phrase, "Oh, they're a natural born salesman," but the reality is that salespeople aren't born, they're made. When people say they're a natural born salesperson, they've got a gift of the gab, it might mean that they can talk a good game, but they're not a great salesperson. And we'll cover that in a little bit. But salespeople, if you're not good at sales, then you're probably because you've not read enough books or you've not learned enough about it. Sales is a learned skill that anybody can do, but it doesn't mean that you like it to start with. So to be good at sales, two things that you must do, and that is to train and practice. Like a great actor, they learn their script and their techniques and great questioning skills, and then when they're on the screen or on the stage, it looks like they're totally natural. So training and practice and training so important for the salespeople. You could judge a good sales team by asking just how often are you training, how often are you practicing. So if we have multiple salespeople in a team, then have sales training meeting every day. Have an hour every day, very least once a week. The sort of things you can talk about is, now, how are we handling objections? What objections are we regularly getting? Even if it's just you on your own, what objections am I regularly getting? And how do I deal with different modalities of people? So training is a fundamental, basic. We then move on to, well, when we're actually in front of somebody, how do we get them to make a decision? What's behind that buying decision? So there's two things at play here. There's logic and emotion involved in a buying decision. Some people will say, oh, I always make a decision based on logic. The reality is that most buying decisions are based on emotion. I've got here 80-20. Some people will say it's 100% based on emotion, whatever the buying decision. We'll cover this in a bit more detail here, but this is important for you to understand that emotion is a big part of the sale. And so building relationships is important too. Why do they want it? What will it mean to them to make this purchase? Even if it's a B2B sale, which on the face of it looks, there's no emotion in it. I'm buying a load of pens or staplers from. But what's the emotion that could be involved in that? Well, the person responsible for delivering those pens or those staplers might be looking for positive feedback from the people they're delivering to, and they might want to be recognized as good supplier of that. So there might be some emotion in that. There's always emotion. But ultimately, we need to reach this emotional reason for them to want to buy. And they could just be that if they're not buying from you, it could just be that they don't like you. We've got to get to that emotion. So let's look at the different types of salespeople. There may be some that you recognize in here. Some of these are going to be good. Think about when you've had a good sales experience. Often we think of salespeople as negative, but there's often a situation where we've come across a really good salesperson. And see if you recognize any of these. So first is the order taker. So the order taker, and I see this in business as well. At least one or two of my clients have got these where the people think that they're salespeople, but really they're just order takers. They're account clerks, if you like. They're picking up the phone and taking the orders. So this is where we just wait for somebody to ask, and then we just fulfill the order. But what's the negative side to that? What's the downside to that? We might think, oh, well, we're too busy to change, to talk to them about anything else. We've got to just take the order. But how good is that customer service? You might think, well, the person knows what they want, but do they really know what they want? Are they the expert, or are you the expert? Could asking them a few questions not only help us to sell more, but help them to understand exactly what they need? Think about going to a DIY shop. Going to a DIY shop, you've just left home, you've got a flat, and you've never painted anywhere before in your life, and you've no idea what to do. You go to the DIY shop because you hear that's where you got to go, and you see some paint and you see some brushes, and you think, right, this is good, I'm good to go. Somebody just takes your order and sends you out the door. Nobody thinks to ask you some questions about exactly what sort of thing you're painting, what sort of, what you're trying to finish, you're trying to get. What else do you need? Do you need coveralls? Do you need gloves? Do you need masking tape? Do you need thinners to wash the brushes out afterwards? Are you going to one coat? Are you going to coat it again in three years' time? All these questions, which could save the person having to come back to you needless amounts of time, it's about providing a great service to the customer by asking questions and giving us the opportunity to sell additional products and services. So order taker, product pusher. Who's ever had a product pusher? Somebody who talks about nothing but the product. Well, you've got to try the SS109. It's the greatest thing on the market. It does this, got these bells and whistles. It's going to really... Never had one of those before. I'm pretty sure we've either experienced it or seen somebody similar on television before. With no question, no idea about exactly what you need. They're just pushing that product. And think about it, if there's that old saying that if you've got a hammer, every problem's a nail. If the problem's a screw and you've got a hammer, what are you going to do? You're going to try and whack it harder with the hammer, right? But if we can find out more, then we might understand that no, we don't need a hammer with this problem. We need a screwdriver. So careful of the product pusher. Who else have we got here? Overseller. Promises the world just to get a sale. I've got a client at the moment who's got a lot of inbound online traffic, and they've got somebody who sold them a online bot to gather all their data and to spit it out with all of the information they need and tell them and give them the people's information into a CRM, and all the things that they were promised by the salesperson, who turns out to be the owner of the business, is completely rubbish. They are on the phone to the developers saying, no, we can't do that, we can't do that, or we can't do that, which is fundamentally what they bought it for. So when you're overselling something, then you might get the sale, but how are you going to be rewarded in the long run? You know, we can't be... Gone are the times when you could sell, you could do that and not worry about the consequences. So we've got to make sure that we're professionally helping people to buy. And if we've not got something that they need, we're not going to make the sale. So overseller, I'm sure none of you are an overseller. This is who we want to be, the problem solver. So the problem solver asks questions so that you can solve a problem. Now, in a sales environment, in a sales meeting, whatever the sales meeting, a sales meeting, by the way, could be someone walks into a corner shop to buy a chocolate bar. That's a sales meeting. It could be you're meeting a board of directors. That's a sales meeting. They're different for all types of businesses. It's still a sales meeting. Now, in every sales meeting, someone always makes a sale. Either you sell to them to buy, or they sell to you that you can't help them. Which is it? So if you're getting people saying no to you, then they're selling to you that they don't need your product or service. Now, it might be that you've come up with that scenario, that ending. You found out due to your questioning that they don't need what you've got to offer. And you can tell them and maybe even refer them on to somebody else. That somebody's always making a sale. And think about this phrase as well. True communication is the response you get. True communication is the response you get. If they're not buying, either you haven't communicated it well enough, or you haven't got something for them to sell. So how do you communicate well enough to uncover the information that you need to know if you can help them or not, and to what level? Well, the answer is questions. So we're going to look into this in more detail in the coming slides. And this is one of your greatest tools that I've mentioned already, is becoming a world-class salesperson, is asking great questions. And don't worry, you don't need to memorize hundreds of different questions, but I'll show you the types of questions that you need to know. Certainly, a script would be very useful to come into play, and becoming really familiar and practicing with that script, that's really helpful. The more practice you make with that script, the more naturally you'll come out with those questions. But being able to know the types of questions so that you can ask a question off the cuff, that's a skill as well. So, but before we get into their importance, it's important to understand, first of all, before we get into the questions, it's important to understand what's driving you. Okay. So great salespeople, and funny enough, this came up with a client on a call today. He was worried about making phone calls to prospective customers. Actually, these were all people he already knows, but he was worried. And so I helped him to understand that he was focusing on thinking he was trying to convince them to do something. Whereas if he started focusing on them, then he'd get what he wanted. So we talked about his purpose. What is the purpose? What's your purpose from these sales meetings? If you focus on the prospect, not on your product, you always come out in front. It's the law of precession. It means that if you focus on one area, you'll be rewarded from another area. So if you focus on really helping somebody, then you'll find that you'll get sales. Even if you're not helping that person, if that person doesn't buy from you, then the universe will reward you in a way to give you something in return, and probably a referral because they're impressed with how well you've looked after them. So purpose, what do they want to have from buying you? Focus on the prospect, not the profit, even if you have to recommend them to someone else. So when you focus on a great outcome for them first, you'll get your needs met. So my belief is that everything is connected to everything in the universe. And like I said, if you focus on helping other people, then you'll get what you want. So leads us on nicely to the formula for change. Now, this is useful in any part of life. This is one of our fundamental general principles for life and for business. We're talking about it in the context of sales, but for the rest of your business, talking to your team, suppliers in life, this is helpful. Now, what we're talking about here is changing somebody from where they are now to where you want them to be. Now, in this case, it's changing them from not working with you, not buying your product, not buying your service, to buying your service. Now, as we've already established, that lots of people have negative views about salespeople. It's hardwired to us, or through experience, we're mistrusting some salespeople. So when you're in a sales situation, expect people to be mistrusting of you. So we've got to take that in mind and build their trust. The other thing we've got to think about as well is that the emotion. To make the sale, we've got to get to the emotion. There's logic involved as well, but it gets the emotion. So this is a mathematical equation, and some of you I know might have seen this already before, but as always, whenever we see something a second, third, fourth, fifth time, then we might take another learning from it. So I'd urge you, if you've seen this before, instead of saying I know, say isn't that interesting? So the components of this are dissatisfaction. By the way, there's 4 components here to help somebody to change to the way you want them to change. First of all is dissatisfaction. I'm just conscious about what I've said there. It might sound like I'm trying to manipulate people. We're not manipulating people here. We're never manipulating people. We're helping them. If you uncover a need and they don't buy from you, and your product or service is as good as or better than your competition, then you're allowing them to buy inferior goods from your competition, and that's a disservice. So we're not manipulating them. What we're doing is we're helping them to uncover the needs to be able to buy a superior product or service from us. But if there isn't a need, we won't be selling to them. So I want to make sure that's clear. And because we're ethically selling to people, professionally helping people to buy. So first concept is, the first part of this is dissatisfaction. The first thing we've got to uncover for them to want to change and them to want to buy from you is, what are they dissatisfied with? What is it they're dissatisfied with the current situation that makes them want to change? So let's say that they're thinking about buying solar panels. Now, what's the dissatisfaction? Now, through through some conversation, you might have uncovered that they want to do their bit for the planet. They want to stop burning fossil fuels, and they're dissatisfied with the amount of how gas prices are rising and how that's having a negative impact on the earth as well. So that's what they're dissatisfied with. So great, we've got something that they're dissatisfied with. But just being dissatisfied isn't the whole picture. So what else do we need to focus on? We need to focus on the vision. So they're dissatisfied with paying out high prices for coal and gas. But what's the vision? How good could it be? Well, imagine you've got a roof full of solar panels which are generating sustainable energy for you and your family at a reduced cost, and that's having a beneficial impact to the planet. We've got dissatisfaction tick and vision. Excellent. But we could have both of these, but the first steps are seen as too complicated and they still won't go ahead with us. So we've got to make sure they see the first steps of working with us are nice and simple. So let's say they were dissatisfied, they have got a vision of how it could be, but they see that the complicated process of getting the paperwork signed and then going to the next town to go to the showroom and seeing this, that's all too complicated. So how can you really simplify your process, make it as easy as possible for them? Something along the lines of, all you need to do is click on this link here, fill in your details, and then we're ready to go. We do all the rest for you. Now, all of these components still may be in place, but there's one step that could be holding you back, and that's their resistance to change. Now, as I've mentioned already, people are naturally skeptical about salespeople. They're resistant to change, especially if they don't know you. So more and more, we have to build the trust with our prospects and to make sure that they trust us. Now, part of this can be done in your marketing to make sure that they understand more about us in the marketing. We're not going to cover marketing today. We'll do that in another webinar. But certainly in the sales process, we can reduce their resistance by building trust. One area is by building rapport. We'll talk about that in a bit more detail. But what are some of the things that we can do to build that rapport or reduce that resistance? Well, let's come on to how each of these shows up as an emotion or a logical response. So what do we think that dissatisfaction is? Dissatisfaction is pain. That's going to be emotion. That's a fear. Vision, excitement about the future, that's emotion. Resistance, how we feel about somebody, trust somebody or not, that's emotion. First steps, I've put logic because logically, what are the first steps? But again, if your first steps seem too hard, they'll get a feeling about you that they don't want to work with you. And again, that's emotion. So you can see how much of the buying decisions made on emotion. So how do we get this information then? And we've covered it already, that it is our best weapon, and that's questions. Questions, but not just questions. We've got to listen twice as often as you speak. If you listen twice as often as they speak, then they'll sell themselves. So what do I mean by that? Well, imagine you're having a coffee. Imagine you're having a coffee with somebody. Your job is to finish your coffee before they do. You want their coffee to go cold before yours does, because you want them to be speaking all the time and for you to be listening. You're sipping your coffee while they're talking. You're asking great questions and they're talking. So how do we do that? So let's focus on some simple question techniques to help you with this. So we want to start off with this is a question funnel. So how do we start off with this? So we start off with open-ended questions. Open-ended questions. Then we get a bit more specific. Then we come up with a solution. Then we temperature check to see where they are in relation to our solution. Then we use details to funnel them into a final solution. So let's start off with open-ended questions. What sort of questions are open-ended questions? Well, we've got here examples. So who, where, what, where, and when, and why, and how. So these are open-ended questions. The idea here, the reason why the funnel is high, wide at the top, is because we want to get as much information as possible. But just by asking simple questions. So let's go back to the example of the person who's fitting solar panels. What might an open-ended question be? Could it be something like, what is it you've got planned here? Or a lovely house. What are you doing? Just asking really open-ended questions and get them talking. Now, a key thing here is we want to play dumb and dig deep. What do I mean by that? Well, just what it says. We're gonna get them to expand on what they say. Now, some people will talk for England, and you just need to perhaps guide them in certain directions. So they're talking. You might need to say, well, just a moment. You mentioned a minute ago about you've got plans for the garden. Tell me more about that. Now, those 3 words are one of your greatest tools as well. Tell me more. It's not a question, but it gets them talking. So you could say it's a question. Tell me more. Write that down and make sure you and your team are using that. It gets people talking about a specific thing that you want to know more about. But playing dumb, this is an interesting thing. When I joined Action Coach 9 years ago, and I heard that, I thought, I don't want to play dumb. If I ask people what do they mean or say tell me more, then they'll think I'm stupid. And I'm the business coach. I need to look like I know everything. So I didn't like that at the time, but I realized that people don't think you're dumb. Remember, people are talking about their favorite subject when you're asking these questions, and they're happy just to carry on talking. So don't be fearful of looking dumb, because you won't. Ask them questions like, what does that mean? Or could you explain that a bit more detail? Or tell me more about that. And they'll be happy to tell you more. They're glad. People are glad somebody's listening. Think about it. How often do people really truly listen? Have you ever had somebody who's just waiting for their turn to speak? And you know that they're not really listening. So when people get truly listened to, that's a great way to build their trust in you, because rarely do we get somebody truly listening. Now, while we're on that moment, that subject of building trust, how else can we build trust from this listening? One way is to repeat back what you've heard them say. We started with some open-ended questions, and we've perhaps got a little bit more specific. We said, a moment ago you said this. Tell me more about your plans to do that. And they tell you more about that. After you've heard them say that, a great way to build trust is to repeat back what they've said. So you might say something like, so John, what I've heard there is that you've just bought this house. You've got lots of plans for the future. You want to get some solar up on the roof. Ultimately, you'd like to develop the garden, and you'd like to put some lighting in. But what you're really fearful is this, this, and this, and ultimately you want this to happen. And you're using the same language that they've used. So if they're using colourful language, feel free to repeat that colourful language. If they're using a certain tone, then use that tone. Repeat back, because people buy. Let me explain why. People buy from people, right? You may or may not have heard that. More so, people buy from people like them. So if they think you're like them, that builds the trust too. So by repeating back in their language how they've said something, then they'll take that natural assumption that you're like them. So what have we got then? Open-ended questions, getting specific on a particular part of it, repeating back to them to build that trust. And then we're going to look at some of the rest of this in a bit more detail. Now, one of the things I mentioned about is that people mistrust salespeople. There's a great book by Alan Pease called Questions Are the Answers. And in it, he mentions about if you say it as the salesperson, you're wrong. If they say it, they're right. What do I mean by this? So it's very easy because you're the expert, and I'm going to stick with the example I've got with the solar panels. You're the expert. Now they might say something, and all of a sudden you rush to the assumption, you connect all the dots because you know all about solar panels, you know all about what it is they need, and you're going, they need this, they need this, they need this. He means this, he wants this. And you've connected all the dots, and before you know it, you've answered all the questions and you're ready to give them the solution. What you need is you need the XYZ panel with the 414 booster and the thingamabob. You tell them a solar panel salesman. And you're giving them a solution. But the trouble is, remember, they have a built-in mistrust of salespeople. So if you say black is black, they'll say, no, it's white. If I say this shirt is blue, they'll say, oh, it's got white buttons. So we've got to get them to say what their needs are. So it might be that we've made the assumption and we've connected the dots and we think they need this. We've got to get it coming out of their mouth. So how might that look? So what you're saying here is, so tell me a bit more about the problems that you're facing currently. Well, I'm reliant on natural gas and these color gas bottles. It's causing me this problem, And how's that impacted? Well, it's impacting the environment. It's making me why I don't like this. And how's that make you feel? I feel terrible because I'm burning all this fossil fuel and I want to be clean living. Okay, right. So now we've got them to say what the problem is. We've got them to say. So now when we give a solution, so this solution, it means that you're no longer burning fossil fuels. You can now feel better about the environment. We're just repeating back all of the needs that they've said. Hope that makes sense? So remember, we've got to get them to verbalize what their needs are, not just make the assumption. Let's think of an example. So don't tell them this is the 10 benefits of your product. We want them to come up with the needs, so we then show them what's the best product for them. With each question, I've mentioned already that listening, being present is such a skill, and it's difficult. If you're not used to being present, your brain is a powerful thing that can go off at tangents and think about all sorts of things. You know, you could be in a sales meeting and your brain will be thinking, oh, crikey, did I leave the oven on? Well, what we got for tea tonight? I must drop round and pick up that key from the neighbour. You could be thinking about all sorts of things. Meanwhile, your prospect's talking away and you're not really being present. So practicing being present is an excellent skill if you can do that. Personally, I meditate every day and that's really powerful. Whatever works for you to make sure that you're present with the individual in front of you and practice listening. It is such a powerful skill. So things that you can also do to show that you're listening is to just give positive strokes. So you probably do this already without even realizing it, but just to sort of, oh yeah, it's little noises almost like, oh yeah, oh yeah, that's funny. And that's where we come into the tell me more, or what does that mean? Oh yeah, just little subtle encourages that we call them, positive strokes to get to the emotion. Reducing that or building that rapport, if you like, and reducing that resistance. All of the questioning and making them to feel like they're listened to all helps to reduce their resistance, and that builds their emotion. They might buy from you because they like from you. There will be a certain portion of the population who will buy from you if they like you. Not everybody, but there will be some. So just by doing this, you can increase your sales. So what's the cycle that we're talking about here then? So first of all, just to repeat, ask the question. Listen, give a positive stroke. Oh yeah, makes sense. Then ask another question. Then question, play dumb. What does that mean? Can you tell me more about that? Get them talking until you reach the emotion. Do you remember what I said in that example? So the guy who had the gas, he was using natural gas, and then you say, well, crikey, that sounds bad. What does that mean to you? Well, it means that I'm burning fuel and I don't like it. And oh yeah, and how does that make you feel? It makes me feel terrible. All of a sudden we've reached some emotion. Great. Once we've got to the emotion, then we're close to the sale. And it should look a bit like this. Your question and process should go, you ask a question, and then we dig deep. We dig a bit deeper. They give an answer. We ask another question. Dig a bit deeper. What does that mean? You said there that you're worried about using fossil fuels. How does that impact you? They give an answer. Dig a bit deeper. Right, and you said there that that's making you feel a bit, not great. What does that mean? They give an answer, dig a bit deeper, ask a question, dig a bit deeper. Finally, when you keep asking these questions, they'll say something like, well, how does all this work? That's when you get to the emotion. They ask you that question, you answer, and that's when you've got the sale. We've got to keep asking these questions until we get to the emotion. This is the framework, if you like, for us to follow. So rapport building, what else could we do to build rapport? We've thought about asking questions to get them to know, like, and trust us. Mark, my colleague Mark, he talks about MMFISH, the acronym MMFISH. Make me feel important, safe, and happy. So how do we build that know, like, and trust, that rapport? Well, get them talking about themselves. Something that works for me is that I always ask where people are from, because I've traveled a lot, and there's a chance that I know a bit about where they're from, or I've been near there, or there's some sort of connection. If you can make a connection with something that you know about them, or they've got kids, I've got kids, lots of people have kids, then you've got some sort of connection there. Don't move forward. Some say don't move forward to talking about the product until you've built that rapport. So find some sort of connection. Now, we're not going to force, and we're never going to lie. People see through that, and it's not authentic to do that anyway. But if you ask some questions about them, then you'll uncover some sort of commonality. That's what we're looking for to build some rapport. The sales part. So we don't need to do a lot of selling if we're asking good enough questions. And then the follow-up, it might be in the first sales meeting we don't make the sale. It might be that we set an appointment to move on, to agree to talk to them again in the future about something else. We might be building the relationship to have more sales. We might be nurturing them. So let's have a look at where we are so far, and then what we're going to cover off to finish. So we've looked at logic versus emotion. We've looked at the formula for change and how the power of question and listening and building rapport. Now, take a screenshot of this if you want, or there'll be another option to take a screenshot at the end. And by the way, if you want these slides, I can send them to you. We're going to just go through each of these next steps here, which is the different parts of your sales process. Now, every business has a sales process, no matter how big or small your sales process is, how big or small your business is, every business has a sales process. And your sales process, each touch point or connection with your prospect is an opportunity for them to say, I don't want to do business with you. And so what we've got to do is we've got to look at each one of those touch points and make sure that it's robust enough and it's doing the right job for them to move on to the next part. So we're going to go through different parts of your sales process, or this is really the sales meeting, if you like, to help you to do those conversions. So let's look first then at the purpose statement. What's a purpose statement? Well, imagine in a sales meeting, the person you're selling to may or may not ever have bought from somebody like you or something like you before, or they may have bought something like what you sell before, but may not have bought from you. So we want to put them at ease and just explain the whole process. So purpose statement does that. It's one of the most important parts of the meeting. So permission. So is it okay if I outline how we will work together? Is that okay? Getting their permission. And you might have heard that people say getting a certain amount of yeses, get people used to saying yeses. There's no harm in that, but it's just common sense to ask permission for people to proceed, and that gives their permission to move on. Then what's the process? So just explain to them the process of the meeting, how you're going to run this meeting. So what I'll do is I'll ask you some questions, you'll give me some answers, and from that I'll come up with some solutions. If there are some solutions, great. If there's not, then I'll refer you on to a better resource. Then the solutions, let them know that you'll be making some solutions, and even that you have in mind to, that you're going to do that. Also, show the price where you can. Show the price as soon as possible to avoid sort of sticker shock or people all of a sudden saying, "Whoa, how much?" So as early as you can, show the price. When I say price, careful of that word price. If you're selling a high ticket item, you might want to use something like investment, if it's an investment. Then we've got the agreement. If we agree that the solution's good, then I'm going to ask you to make a decision, and then there'll be an investment. Explain what the investment is, and then I'm going to ask you to make an investment, and we want to know upfront if they can't do this. So it's good if we know this before we get involved in a long meeting. If we have a script which we can read from, but we know it word for word, and we're really clear on how we're working with them, being upfront with them so that they can trust us. If we can find great solutions, then we'll make a decision and invest and get started right away. Is that okay? So having all that in a script is something that your salespeople or you can practice and practice and practice, so that when you're with the prospect, it comes across naturally. And you might have multiple purpose statements. If you've got multiple different meetings because you've got a longer sales process, then you might have different statements. You may not be wanting the sale every time that you make the meeting, so you might leave that out of some of the meetings. There could be a purpose statement in any business. Let's say it's a restaurant's purpose statement. Instead of saying, "Hi, I'm Fred, I'll be your waiter today," instead you might say, "Hi, I'm Fred, I'm going to take your order. I'm going to make sure that you get everything you want. I'm going to make sure that you have a great meal and that you leave having a great experience." So which of those two do you think you'd prefer, or you'd have a better experience with? That's the purpose statement, the idea of the purpose statement. How can you use that into your business? Next is often, well, not necessarily next, because we might want to pre-qualify people before we get into a meeting, but this is another component we need to consider. Who other than yourself will be involved in making the decision? We don't want to get to the sales meeting and then them tell us, once we've been through the whole presentation or talk through them, that they've got somebody else to ask permission from. So really important that everybody who's involved in making the decision, if it's a consumer and it's a husband and it's a wife, you're only speaking to one of them, can you get both of them involved? Now, I spoke to somebody the other day who was a salesperson, and he's a good salesperson. He's got his own business, successful business, he'd had a call from somebody who was selling windows. Let's say it was windows, for example, and he was interested. And he said, well, we'll send somebody around to see you. Now, is your wife going to be there? And he said, no, my wife's not going to be there. And they said, well, she's got to be there, or we can't come around and see you. And they just completely refused to do anything. And in the end, he said, okay, then, look, she's nothing to do with this. I'm making the purchase myself. But if you're not going to see me without her, then, don't come. So make sure you're making this decision based on the right questions. If they have got the authority to make the decision themselves, then go ahead with that. Just make sure you're asking them. You can be honest with them. Say, look, what we've got to show you is something that is probably best coming from us. And if there's somebody else involved in the buying decision, it's probably best that we show all parties. Then you can all make a decision yourself, as opposed to us telling you and showing you and giving you all the information, and then you having to try and explain it to the other person without all the information. Does that make sense? Good. So finance is the next thing. So very important. We've got to ask this tactfully. And instead of saying, what can you afford? We might say that what do they have a budget for? Obviously finances are really important. Can I just ask what budget you've set aside for this purchase? So we're asking what budget, not how much they can afford. And if they don't know, great. Well, give me a ballpark figure of what you think that it should be. So we're not trying to sell them something they can't afford. And if it's way too low, if we say, let's say that the figure they give's way too low, say that if we found a solution that's a few pounds more than your budget, could the budget be stretched? Just ask so you've got an understanding. It might be that you just say, look, that's not within our facility, our ability to be able to do that, but we could make a recommendation to another company who specializes in that sort of budget materials. Or it could be that you could then adjust your quote to give them a solution that's at the lower end of the budget. A great way to convert people is by asking these questions. You're taking on all of their needs, and you might then give them 3 quotes. There could be multiple ways of doing that, but 3 quotes. The middle one, for instance, one way of doing it is the middle one is the quote of what they've asked for. In the quote, you've said to them, or you've phoned them up and said to them, now, I've given you 3 quotes. The middle one's just what you said that you wanted. Now, but I did bear in mind that you're on a tight budget. So what we've done is we've shopped around for some more budget materials, and we're able to get a cheaper quote for you. That's the other quote that we've given you. I recommend you take that. It's a fix for now, but it's not going to last you as long. Now, the other thing we've put in there, you mentioned that you wanted to have this done as well. Now, what we've suggested, we've given you a 3rd quote, which is added that work in getting that done now. You can get it done cheaper by having it done while we're there, because we won't have to come out twice to you. So I've put 3 quotes in there. Let us know which one you want. Now that shows to the person that you've been listening to what they wanted. You understand their situation, and again, builds that trust, and them trusting you. You're the expert. Also, obviously, has the benefit of you potentially upselling or not losing a sale if they're on a budget. So after we've reached the emotion and we've gathered the info, then we come up with a solution. So based on what you've told me, Jane, Bob, Mr. Smith, whatever, either X or Y would suit your needs best. And explain the solution and the investment and why X is better than Y. Watch the person's face or hand movements to see the reaction. So let's give an example for this then. So let's say that you're an electrician. I don't know why I'm focusing on electricians at the moment, but you've been around property with them and asked a lot of questions, what their plans. You've also seen some opportunities to upsell, and so they've just wanted, say, an EV charger, but they've told you that they're developing the garden too, and that you've asked some questions which have uncovered that they want to have lighting and audio in the garden as well. So like I just said, solution X is this, but solution Y gives you this, this, and this, as I've just mentioned, and that gives an opportunity for the upsell. So after we've offered the solution, we want a temperature check. So temperature check is really just to see if they're in the right place, because it could be that we might think they're sold, but they're thinking, no, this is way more than what I was expecting, or this has just not got all the components I thought. The temperature check is just really to see where they are. We don't want to go on if they're not ready to buy, because all what will happen is when we go to get them to sign, they'll say, I need to think about it. So temperature check just sees if we're on the same page. So something like, how does that fit with what you had in mind? Or, so which one of these fits with what you had in mind? And they'll tell you. If you see them humming and say, well, I didn't really expect it to pay that much, great, we can look at that then. And you don't have to go forward and then retrace all your steps. You can work around it with them. So they'll say yes or no, and then we can go back to the solutions afterwards. How does that fit with what you had in mind? Which one fits? Okay, great. So then we want, if we're going through to the sale, then we want some detailed questions. We want to assume the sale and give them some detailed questions. So things like, how would your business normally pay for this sort of program? Or would you prefer to implement that solution at my office or here? Or I'd like to get started and we can set an appointment for da 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 da. Is that okay for you? So you're assuming the sale. Okay. We've found out all their needs. We know that they want that this is going to help them. And this is exactly what they need. We've temperature checked to make sure that they're happy with them. Now we're assuming the sale. Okay? They can still say no, but you're being assumptive and you're being assertive as well. Notice what I mean by assuming the sale is we're not asking them a yes or no question. So if you're doing this for yourself or you're doing it for your team members and you're writing a script together, make sure you understand the nuance between an assumptive sale and a yes or no answer. So one of those questions here, how would your business normally pay for that, for this sort of program? Let's assume in the sale. Whereas a yes or no question would be, do you want to go ahead with that? That's a yes or no, and 50% chance that they're going to say a no. Whereas these questions demand an answer, a detailed answer. How do your business normally pay for that? Oh, well, we normally pay by this. Then you can move on. Okay. So would it be okay if we outlined what we need to do to get that underway? And they're going to say yes or no. But chances are, because they've already said yes to a few other things, then they're going to move on to the yes. And again, we're not selling them anything that they don't want. However, you will get some people who are objecting, and that's okay. Objections are not a bad thing. Objections probably mean that they're interested, but they just want to clarify. So first thing we're going to do is agree with their objection. So it's too expensive. Absolutely, Bob. I can see how you could see it that way. So agree with their objection. Then we want to isolate their objections. So other than the being too expensive, are there any other reasons stopping you going ahead today? You want the real reasons. So it could be that they may, get the real reasons and get them to list all the reasons. Isolate them. And then we've got here is that it's too expensive. There's no other reason. So if we could figure out a way around that, then we'd be good to go ahead. Yes, absolutely. So if money wasn't a problem, you'd want to go ahead, wouldn't you? If there's no other reason, yes, we're going to go ahead. Great. So then we're going to move on to the agreement. Great. Let me explain exactly what's involved in that. Fantastic. So listen, what we've covered here today is I've deliberately kept it around a process, understanding that logic versus emotion, how we get people to change, and the questions and the listening, how the power that makes in your sales conversions. We've got a bit more detail here on the right hand side. These 9 items here, this is really just how to put together your sales meeting together. What I want you to do is just take some note, look at your notes and take an action from today. So what's been most useful? What's been the top learnings from today? And then what's your action from today?